page 737 in the Pew Bible. Just take it out. Let's take a look at this. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 16. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get all that you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Now, what I would like for you to do just now is to go through this once again, and this time I would like for you to read the bold print words on the screen, the personal pronouns that saturate this parable. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. We'll tear down barns and build bigger ones, and there we'll store all my grain and my goods, and say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Do you see the problem? I mean, it just kind of jumps out when we put it in this context. He was absorbed with himself. He was thinking only of himself. He wasn't thinking past himself. He was thinking of his own stuff, his own happiness. His problem. Now, it's interesting, his problem, it was not that he was rich. You know, there are a couple of things his problem was not. The Bible begins by saying, Jesus said, he was a rich man. It didn't fault him for being rich. That was not the problem. I mean, it was later that he had problems. It was later that he gets the pronouncement. But the fact that he was rich was not the problem. The problem was not that he was blessed with more riches. I find it fascinating that this man is the recipient of an incredible miracle. Can you imagine what it must have taken in terms of a crop reproduction in order for the man to conclude after the crops came in that the best way to deal with it is to tear down all the barns that he had on his property and rebuild? How could a single crop have so much abundance that it would warrant destroying all current barns and rebuilding barns substantial enough to handle the crop that just came in? I mean, that was a miracle. And I read a sermon this week in preparation for today that it was titled, How to Mess Up a Miracle. You see, many of us experience miracles in our lives, don't we? We experience God's blessing, we experience windfalls, or something happens that we didn't expect, or we have a huge blessing, and then we have a decision to make. What are we going to do with the blessing? What are we going to do with the miracle? What are we going to do when the raise comes? What are we going to do when the new job occurs? What are we going to do when we have something unexpected happen that's a blessing in our lives? That's the real question, and that's the question that this rich fool had to answer, and he had the wrong answer. It's because he was chasing the mirage of more. This is how it will be for anyone who stores up things for himself but is not what? Rich toward God. Could it be that this is our problem too? That sometimes we get so focused on the stuff that relates to me that I forget where it came from. And I forget to do what the rich fool forgot to do. I forget. Because we're chasing the mirage of more. You know, as I thought about this message today, I thought about what would be helpful for us, practical next steps that we might take as we go from this place, as we think about what God might want us to do. And I would invite you just now to take your bulletin out. Inside the bulletin there's a yellow card, and if you could just take that card out It's a connection card, and on the back of the card, it has something about today's notes. It's not even notes, it's just a little blank space on the back of the card. And what I would like to invite you to do is to take this out as we consider what we might do to follow up today's message. Practical steps that we might take this week as we think about how God might work in our lives, what we should do. First of all, I'm wondering how many with me would make a commitment. Would you commit during the next week by yourself in your quiet time to reread this passage of Scripture and just let God talk to you about it? If so, you'll put a check mark next to number 1. Just put a check mark there, and I know what you mean. And then for number 2, I will consider ways that I should be rich toward God. If you're willing to say, yeah, I will consider ways, and that's not just about money, you see, that's our time, our talents, the resources that God has given us. I will make that a consideration. Put a check mark in number 2. And then finally, number 3, I will pray that God will help me to always remember Him when I am blessed with more. Because, you see, that was the problem of the rich fool. And if you could, after you fill that out, if you could turn that in after the service today, you could just hand it to the deacons or elders at the door as you leave, or you could hand it to the person at the information desk, and that will help me to know whether this is something that resonated with you. And if you want to give me some notes about what you feel about the message today, I would really appreciate the feedback. I'll be looking at these this week. And just now, as we conclude our service, I think it would be nice if we could sing a song together. This one is called Jesus is Lord of All. It's not in our hymnals, but we'll have the words on the screen. I'd like to invite our ladies trio to come up and lead us as we sing together, Jesus is Lord of All.